Thank you for that kind of introduction, Emma. Yes, I'm Marty Rivera. I'm going to be talking about AltaSeads Conservancy for seaweed seed banking. Um, but before I do that, I want to just talk a bit about my personal journey getting here. And Emma kind of highlighted on that on her introduction. But essentially, I grew up in Puerto Rico. So you would think, yeah, clearly I was always by the sea. However, not really, because I was actually raised in this inland with no actual coastline. But still, I made it out to the sea. Um, so another thing about me is I'm a first generation college student. I majored in environmental sciences. My main focus was on the coastal environment. I was just immediately called to it. I like sand dunes, coral reefs, and all that. And I guess, like Emma had said, my first interaction with seaweeds was actually when I was doing a research project on anaerobic digestion for methane production. I was using Sargassum species for the feed source for these work. Um, from there, I really discovered, hey, photosynthetic organisms are really neat. And so I started working with coral bleaching because, well, back home in the Caribbean, we do have a lot of coral reefs, and it's known that those are in peril with rising sea temperatures and ocean acidification and all that. So it just seemed like a natural place to go there. Um, so one thing I also feel like mentioning is being a first generation college student. It's always been like difficult, I guess, with like what is called usually imposter syndrome. It's like sometimes really hard to, and I struggle with that. So, but hey, made it out here and, got my master's degree in 2017. And then, well, 2017, we had a big thing happening in Puerto Rico. We had this hurricane, which was massive and really left me struggling. But then yeah, luckily found an opportunity where I moved on to the east coast of the U.S. to Connecticut. Started working in the Seaweed Marine Biotechnology Lab, which is where I really got into seaweeds under supervision of Dr. Charles Jarish, which it's really one of the pillars of aquaculture here in the U.S. And it was, well, really life changing having that opportunity. And there, like, my main work was working in one of the Department of Energy's ARPA-E Mariner programs, where essentially my contributions to the team, very briefly, was like ensuring kelp growth and health within our collection, also assisting research that was done for example, isolation of kelp myospores using flow cytometry and cell sorting techniques. We did um, direct seeding of kelp into rope to skip the seed string, sort of to accelerate the whole process of seeding and farming. And then also did a bit of work with biostimulants to promote healthier gametophytes and sporophytes, kind of like how they're used for land crops. And yeah, that's just a really quick intro about myself. I feel like I heard another presenter doing this from this same kelp culture series, and I thought it was nice to have that quick intro, so I wanted to do the same. But to go on to the actual presentation, so we have kelp populations in California. So current stock status in California is that following these uncharacteristically warm weather conditions from the 2014-2016, there was a lot of regional biomass that was, we had patchy declines in the south, and then declines in California and extreme declines in Northern California. So many of these populations of giant kelps and bull kelps were impacted by this. And essentially, it boils down to what is El Nino Southern oscillation, right? Like that's a big deal here, and it impacts a lot of the seawater temperatures, so on. Um, and so, moving on to saying why kelp matters. So it's often overlooked compared to like the coral reefs, which are really colorful and everyone likes looking at the fish and all the colors and diversity. But kelp is also one of the foundational species and one of the most productive ecosystems. It also has many functions like protecting shores from waves, sequesters carbon dioxide, also excess nutrients that might be in the water column, and it maintains a diverse ecosystem for fishes and divers. It's also going to be providing ecosystem services that are valued at a of 560 billions per year. The thing is, kelp is also at risk from many things that are affecting the coral reefs. Like you have ocean warming, ocean chemistry, like ocean acidification, pollutions, pests, disease. All of these things are happening, and these effects can on kelps and kelp forests could have like you know uh, impacts that ripple through the food chain and ecosystems. So, kind of still going on the same train of thought, we have ecological importance, like again, biodiversity. It's an essential habitat for ecologically and economically important species. It serves as a feeding, breeding, and nursing ground for many of these organisms. It also, like I said, had ecosystem services, essentially absorbs nutrient and phosphorus, produces oxygen, and reduces CO2, um, which are all like really important services that it just provides. It's just there. Um, but then on another side of things, there's also the mariculture, right? So we here in the US have like really started to get into seaweed farming, and it has many benefits such as being a reliable food source. It is high in protein, vitamins, and iodine. Um, there like being a upcoming industry, there's like opportunity for jobs in coastal communities in the aquaculture sector. um, there's also new food products um, to support our population. There is definitely so many chefs like I've met over the years I've been in this, like they make some really interesting things with seaweeds, and it's also like just general products that are being manufactured and produced. Uh, so it's all coming along. um, but another thing about seaweed farming is that it's also a sustainable crop. It does not require fertilizer or fresh water for growth, which are two big impacts of what goes on land based agriculture. Um, and yeah, it doesn't even use land, so you can have that land for many other uses. um, and so AltaSeads Conservancy, essentially, I have it here as a 4 points of like goals and our missions that we're trying to focus on. So I'll go one by one. We have seed banking, essentially to build and develop macroalgal collections and expertise. We want to do that for many different kelp species, and we also want to develop a collection of beneficial microbes, um, and create a database for these that is going to be accessible for people. Um, then we have distribution. So there we have like disseminating these holdings and transfer expertise of what we've known and learned about our collection. Um, and this is important for the next 2 points. Like distribution would mean simply developing standard operating procedures and material transfer agreements so that our material can be going to where it's needed, and so that we can have traceability of where things are, where they came from, and where they will go. And now going to restoration, which is like one of the parts that stems from distribution. Well, we want to enable stakeholder communities that are pursuing sustainable ocean restoration. We want to be able to give out material to people that are trying to restore any population that might have been impacted by any of these climate situations that I've mentioned earlier. Uh, and then also we have farming, which we are also hoping to be able to support economically viable mariculture with breeding and farming in mind. Again, just bringing our expertise and really trying to make the most for everyone that is involved in anything seaweed related. And now that's like the four main points about AltaSeads Conservancy. Um, like it was mentioned earlier, I am more on the seed bank curator side, so I'm gonna focus more on that on my talk. So I will go on and talk a bit more about it. AltaSeads Conservancy, we develop and maintain kelp gametophytes, and it's what we call seed banks of West Coast species that have opportunity for restoration and mariculture. So currently, we hold in our collection several species, and I'm not gonna go over them all, but here we have a sample of what we currently hold. Um, Currently, we're at 1,059 individuals here in collection, and just right here quickly, we have some pictures, just so you see what the Spotify life stage is for many of these that we have currently in collection. So, we have feather boa, egregia, bull kelp, anaerocistes, uh, elaria, which I think it's ribbon kelp, uh, pelagophycus, microcystis, of course, and then the other ones like posteltia is the sea palm. Um, yeah, so these are just some of them I just wanted to show. I think it's important for people to know what it is, what these kelps are. uh, and then here's our current map of where our collection is coming from. um, so these right here are just the genus of all these collections, and here in the map you'll see that most of our collection is actually coming from California, just that down here. However, we do have some from Canada, Alaska. We have some from China, and then also Australia. And I should mention that from our collection, we did uh, recently receive a good subset of cultures from an old collection from well, I guess a legacy collection from Mike Nuschel, who was doing amazing work uh, on 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 kelps in general. So we recently added like I think something like 400 of them, and it's really impressive to just have these historical strains now in our collection. Yeah, so to move on about some of the main components of AltaSeads Conservancy, at least from my viewpoint as a seed bank curator. So we have 3 points that are crucial for me, and that is seed banking, of course, aquaculture, and then breeding tools. Yeah, so we have the seed bank. So a seed bank holds and ensures certain species kept in appropriate conditions, right? So ensures that seeds are viable and that we can have them again available. So sort of similar to land seed banks, where they have actual seeds that they keep stored in appropriate conditions. Um, so in our organization and how we keep our seeds is actually we have a life stage of the kelps that is called a gametophyte, but we simplify it as a seed, um, sort of to make it more akin to what a seed bank is for like land crops. um, so these gametophytes that we keep, they can be cataloged and maintained for decades. And like I had mentioned earlier, we do have rigorous database management for these. So we always have the most up-to-date data on where they came from, conditions, ideal conditions for growth or for just low growth or maintenance, and um, wherever they might go, and uh, essentially all the possible things that could happen to these strains that we have in our collection in these small tubes that I show here. Um, so that is essentially for seed banking. Then for the second point that I had mentioned is land-based aquaculture. So currently in our grounds, we have these recirculating aquaculture systems that are ideal for our work as they're not linked to any seawater discharge. So they're self-contained, which means that it will minimize any risk of biosecurity of any of our streams actually going out to nearby waters into the wild, which it's a big deal, and that's why we have this closed loop system to avoid any such risks. So essentially is we have this really neat uh, aquaculture systems. We have like 10 of these 500 gallons, and then on the back here we have like 14 of these 200-gallon ones. We have some other equipment back there, and essentially this would be available for just general biomass growth. Um, it could also be available for research collaboration, aquaculture education, and commercial partners and renting, depending on needs and availability. And then to the last point that I want to make is crossing and breeding, or breeding tools. So with these, we have breeding for sustainability and resiliency. We want to know parentage and populations. And to say is land crops have benefited for breeding efforts since beginning of agriculture, right? There has always been some sort of selection of what is preferred. Um, So with seaweeds, we want to be able to breed for certain traits such as thermal tolerance. This would help against uh, uh, rising seawater temperatures, for example, if we have some that are known to be tolerant to high stress temperatures. We could have fast growth organisms that might be useful for people who are trying to farm these strains. So that would be ideal. Anti-herbivory compounds. Maybe we can have some specific strains that have more of these compounds. Then might this be ideal for restoration purposes, as they might not be predated on? Um, or it could also be commercially important biologically active compounds. And on this point of bioactive compounds, recently got these slides from Jose Diesel from the Nustin lab at University of Southern California, which what's going on here essentially is we're looking at the sugar pathways for Ectocarpus, which is a model organism for brown seaweeds. And well, this is what's going on. This is like how they uh, move sugars around and create different things. But this is the one I actually want to show you. So here on the left, we have the same figure. And the table here shows essentially gene orthologs. And I should probably define that because it's a word that I'm personally not wasn't too familiar with. But essentially, it retains the same function during the course of evolution, and it relates genes from different species coming from a different ancestor. So that's kind of like ortholog. So anyways, these were orthologs that were found here in Macrocystis compared to the Ectocarpus. And so this is what we have. We currently have these in our seed bank, and we were able to see the number of high impact mutations here, this column. And what this means is that we can use this kind of genetic information to aim for these desired traits, such as maybe higher mannitol, for example, or fructose, if we wanted to go for these M2DH path here. It's what's circle red. um, and we could potentially cross these strains that we know have a high impact mutations, excuse me, that are likely to have these, right? And then potentially that can regulate the biochemical pathways, and then they might accumulate more mannitol or fructose. And that's my take on these slides, that I think it's really cool that we can aim for these traits. And so those were like these 3 points that I wanted to make on AltaSeads Conservancy. And then this is another thing that is really important to me. And it wasn't one of the main points, but it's something that we've been doing here a lot. And I just think it's so important to do. And it's just outreach and education, right? Like we have engaged with so many students from so many schools by now since I started here last year in like April. So it's been really cool to see the excitement of these students, and just talking to them about uh, kelp forests, why they're important, what they're doing, um, like how climate and anthropogenic things can affect them, and uh, talking about also what is restoration and how it could be achieved. Um, Conservation efforts like what we're doing here, trying to have these seed banks as a means to uh, just have ex situ control over these populations, and then just in general aquaculture, because again, there's just like this emerging um, industry for aquaculture and in seaweeds. So I think it's really cool, and yeah, that's me with the red arrow. Yeah, so another thing is with AltaSeads, we have uh, just diversity, that we want to have collaborations and a connected ecosystem with many different people. So our seed bank is located out to sea at the port of Los Angeles, with these guys here. Um, and so this network, we want to have a research institute, universities, farmers, and other for-profit organizations to really help us preserve this genetic biodiversity and this variety of kelps in general. So yeah, we have like research institutes over here. We have like industry farmer hatcheries, and then conservation groups and other nonprofit organizations. Uh, One other thing I wanted to mention is collaborations and support. I wanted to point this out, that we did get a really kind donation from Aperture Pet and Life, where they donated um, LED lights for our aquaculture systems, which will allow us to grow kelp under ideal growth conditions, and it will help us actually get up and running with our aquaculture systems, and we can have collaborations and just get going with it. um so one more thing here is thinking about ongoing efforts that we have for our organization. So currently, a thing we're doing is we're increasing our collection. So with that, we have working with Alaska colleagues to seed bank several kelp species and populations throughout Alaska. We're working through permitting, logistics, sample sizes, and really trying to get biodiversity from that region, because, well, they have just different populations up there. They might also be under threat of uh, seawater temperature changes or ocean acidification, and they are also like a big emerging industry for the mariculture of it all. So that's going on. Then we're also receiving some kelp reproductive tissues from here within California, and we hope to isolate new strains for that. So we have it available and conserved for potential habitat restoration or any other potential work. And I think most excitingly is we have a new hire that will be joining us later this month in January. I think, yeah, mid January. Emily Aguirre is going to be joining us, and that's so exciting because, well, we started as a small team, and just having more people to go on and do all these really interesting work is going to be amazing. So that's a big thing going on. Um, but I think that kind of is just a quick overview of our organization and what we're trying to accomplish. And at this point, I will say thank you for your attention. And yeah, I guess I'll do question and comments if there are any. Yeah.